the speaker, Moshe Vardi, who's a university professor, Colonel from George Distinguished Service Professor in Computational Engineering at Rice University, and he's going to give a talk on technology and democracy.
The organizers organizing this maybe work for inviting me. I suspect that I'm only one of my nerd here. I'm an AI researcher. So I had to choose a topic. I was thinking that I can zoom in or zoom out. And I'm going to zoom out and look at technology and society in a very broad way. So I'm a member of the ACM. That's a premier society in computing. It was mentioned here before. And I kind of looked back recently about the previous decade, and there are three celebratory events that ACM did. The first one is in 2012. There was the Turing centenary. Turing was born, it was the 100th birthday of Alan Turing, who was kind of one of the patron saints of computing. And we organized a celebration of computing, talk about ascendant technology. And then 5 years later, there was a Turing Award at 50 years for the Turing Award, the Nobel Prize in Computing, another celebration, look at us, we're so important. And then June last year, just about a year ago, there was ACM celebrated 75th birthday. Now the tone was a bit more somber. The panelists will imagine what might be next for technology and society in years to come. Suddenly, computer scientists are talking about society. We learn a new word. We have to go to a dictionary to see how it is spelled. And not everybody actually was happy about this. One of the participants, a distinguished young computer scientist, put on Facebook, I found the whole thing a little depressing. What is all these adverse consequences we're talking about? Why can't we just celebrate it the way we celebrated it in two previous celebrations? But to understand the somber tone, you just have to look at comparing events. Look at the dates. This was June 10 of 2022. A day before that, the House started the hearing on January 6th insurrection, where we eventually learned pretty much the President of the United States had to subvert the legal tradition of government in the United States. And 2 weeks earlier, we had the Uvalde massacre, where a young gunman killed 2 teachers and 19 children. And I have to say, I took it very personally. One, it was in Texas, but the other one is the name. Every time they say on the radio, Uvalde, I was hearing Vardi. So, and this event also points to a very, very profound polarization in American society on the issue, for example, of Trump. This is from about a year ago, a New York Times poll. Among Democrats, 92% thinks that he threatened U.S. democracy. Among Republicans, 76% think he was exercising his right to challenge the election. About assault-type weapons, again, among gun owners, Democratic gun owners, 84% are for a ban of AR-15 style semi-automatic rifles. Among the Republican gun owners, 75% are against such a ban. And when you have polarization, trust is undermined, and we have political paralysis, and democracy is still in this country is in danger. And it is so much in danger that people are seriously speculating about the so-called the disunited states, talking about an article in the New York Review of Books, talking about a possible breakdown of the United States into the Red Confederation, and I don't know if I would the word confederation or confederacy, two different coalition of states, the red and the blue one, because the values seem to diverge so much. And if you think this is pessimistic, I'm coming from Texas. So we have Texas. In June of last year, the Republican Party, in its convention in Texas, had a platform to put for referendum whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation. Because Texas, after there was a rebellion against Mexico, it was a republic for 9 years before it joined the United States, and now they want to go back. Maybe they want to go back to Mexico even, who knows. So what happened? Historian, I think, will spend the next 50 years asking what happened to this country, who broke the United States. But I will go back only about 40 years, because I think three very pivotal events happened in the past 40 years. Number one, in September 6, 1981, young Vardi arrived as a postdoc at Stanford. More seriously, about a month, less than a month before that, IBM introduced IBM personal computer model 5150, which nobody remembers. You remember it as IBM PC. And earlier in the year, Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as the President of the United States. So let's talk about the consequences of the last two events. The IBM PC was a smashing success that within just a little over a year, when Time Magazine usually had the person of the year, they had the machine of the year. And now they show the IBM PC, the machine moves in, they call it the machine of the year, and the person is looking at the machine. And that started really a tsunami of technology that we have just happened, but so it was reflecting on what happened. By the mid-80s, personal computers already existed roughly from the mid-70s, but they were hobbyist machines. But by the mid-80s, every knowledge worker had a computer on their desktop at work. And within a few years later, they had one at home. In 1989, the World Wide Web was introduced. A few years later, the internet was commercial, went from a government network to a commercial network. And that enabled Google to launch and Facebook to launch. And by 2007, you had iPhone was introduced, and suddenly you have billions of people on the internet. But during the same 40 years, with also a tsunami of neoliberalism, extreme free market capitalism, laissez-faire, economic liberalization, reduction in government spending. We're still fighting these budget fights today. Privatization, deregulation, monetarism, tax reduction, globalization, free trade. Of course, I can talk at length about each one of them, and I won't right now. All of this was taking to the extreme the belief in the invisible hand. Adam Smith, people think that it was in the and it actually, the concept was introduced in his earliest book, and it was the Theory of Moral Sentiments, and he marveled how the market works. They are led by an invisible hand, so without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interest of society as a whole, and provide means for the survival of the species. Market work wonderfully. I want to buy bread, I go and I buy bread, I don't know the baker, I just go and get bread when I need to get bread. But that was interpreted, the modern interpretation of neoliberalism was that greed is good. That was put very bluntly in the famous movie, Wall Street, in 1987. Gordon Green was giving his speech, and he says, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good, greed is right. Somehow everybody is greedy, and social good comes out of it. That was the belief. Well, that's not quite what happened. So we've heard about the decline of manufacturing in the United States. And people think that because all manufacturing went to China or Mexico. But if you look at volume of manufacturing, this is simply not the case. The United States is still a manufacturing giant. The manufacturing pretty much has gone up and up for the last, you go back here to the 50s. Of course, it zigs and zags a little bit, the recession, etc. But employment in manufacturing has picked up roughly around 1980, and it's been gone down since then. We've lost many millions of jobs in manufacturing, huge impact, especially on rural America. If you want to understand what happened politically in the United States, go back to manufacturing. And in a big way, if you look at macroeconomically, there are four kind of big macro indicators. One is productivity growth, which is how we all gradually get richer every generation. And you want GDP to grow, and you want to generate jobs, and you want income to grow. People should get a little better every generation. And what you see here, that roughly these numbers went together from the 50s to the next 30 years. So much so that it almost looks an economic law that they must go together. But something happened in the early 80s. Oops, Ronald Reagan was elected president. And these numbers start to diverge. And you see the productivity continue to increase, and GDP continue to grow, but we're generating few jobs, and incomes are flat. And in a very stark way, this is the tale of two countries. Go back to 1962, and you look at the top 1%er and the bottom 20%er. And you see that in 1962, the top 1% earn about 12% of the national income, and the bottom 20% about 20% of the income. But go back again to just a few years ago, and the last few years, because of the pandemic, everything is scrambled, so I will not show the data to this today. But if you go back just a few years ago, then you see that the situation is reversed. The bottom 1% are earning 12% of the income, and the top 1%, 20% of the income. A tale of two countries. So much so that in July of last year, the New York Times asked all of its columnists to write columns about something they were wrong about. And David Brooks, most of the columnists in New York Times tend to be more on the liberal side. David Brooks is the resident conservative, and his column wrote, "I was wrong about capitalism." He said the most educated Americans were amassing more and more wealth, dominating the best living areas, pouring advantages into their kids. A highly unequal caste system was forming. Now into this economic polarization, you have to toss in cognitive polarization. How did it come about? Well, there used to be something called the Fairness Doctrine, which is television was all using the spectrum, and the spectrum was owned by the government, and you have to listen from the government, and the government had condition. If you're a news channel, you have to be balanced. You have to address all societal issues in a balanced way. And then technology came and enabled cable TV, another proliferation of cables. So the FCC in 1987 abolished the Fairness Doctrine. It used to be, before that, you watch the news, ABC, CBS, NBC, you basically had to decide which anchorman, they were all men, which anchorman you like better, but they all pretty much told the same story. But now imagine, on one hand, watching MSNBC or Fox News, and Fox News is not, there is worse. There is Newsmax and One American Network, and Russia Today, you know, but if you watch one, you live in a different world. The people who watch Fox News, as we have learned, and the people who watch even just CNN live in a different world, cognitive bubbles. And then the internet came forward. So when the internet started, I remember I'm 81, I'm going in 1981, I go to Stanford. There was internet, it was really mostly in the academic community. There was the well, with the bulletin board, there was a very early social network. There was something called Usenet. And the culture at the time was the counterculture, which came just after the 70s. And it was all based on anti-Vietnam War and mistrust of the government. And out of this came the mantra, information wants to be free. Information doesn't want anything. But information wants to be free became the mantra of the day. And so when the World War Web was introduced in the late 80s, if you go back, you'll see what Tim Berners-Lee wrote, unfettered sharing of information. Information seemed to be such a public good, let's share it. Everybody should have access to it. Now pretty soon we realized there was a problem. There was too much information. How do you find stuff? Imagine you go to a library and 1 million books and go look for them. What do you do? So the immediate solution was by Yahoo. What does a library have? Library has a catalog. Let's have a catalog for the internet. So this was what Yahoo did in the very early days. They built a catalog for the internet. Of course, the internet grew by leaps and bounds. It didn't scale. So we came up with search engines. The early ones were pretty bad. But then Google came up with a fantastically good search engine. So it was really a miraculous change. You could find things very fast. But Google had to make money. Information wants to be free. So how does Google make money? And they came up with the idea, what does mainstream media do? Advertising. Let's do advertising. But they discovered very quickly that advertising on internet is different than advertising on TV, for example. On TV you have captive audience. How many times can you go to the bathroom? Okay? On newspaper, if you really want to capture eyeballs, you do a big advertisement. People try to have big banners, but the users hated big banners on the internet. They wanted the content. So Google came up with another beautiful idea, personalized advertising. Let's start, or target advertising, call it. Let's target advertising to you and to you and to you, depending on what we know about you. So we have to gather information about you. That's the beginning of surveillance capitalism. So when you think about machine learning today, where it's been deployed, every time you access information today, it is mediated by machine learning. You do a web search, you use social media, unless you put a URL, what you see is what an algorithm decided you should see. You should realize it. Everything you see, unless you put URL, is what an algorithm decided you should see, and that took the filter bubbles and amplified them even more. Now, the mantra in Silicon Valley, kind of describing surveillance capitalism, if you're not paying for it, because we use Google for free, we use Facebook for free, if you're paying it, you are the product. So what does it mean that you are the product? James Plunkett, an article in 2021, wrote, the search engine or social media platform is little more than a bait, there to hold our attention long enough to capture our licensing data. But what is the data about? Jaron Lanier, the product isn't so much you, it's the ability to behavior of millions of people like you. We're all subject to behavior manipulation all day long, 7 days a week. And Paul Rommel, who was a resident economical guru of Silicon Valley, turned against Silicon Valley more recently. People are realizing the digital advertising model pioneered by Google and Facebook poses a growing threat to democracy. These firms know more about the citizens of the world's democracies than the Stasi knew about East Germans. They can exploit what they know without relying on the coercive power of police state. They can adjust what people see and exercise control by 1,000 nudges. You don't feel that you're being controlled. 1,000 nudges. Now, Facebook, in fact, took personal advertising to the next level, because the model on Facebook is maximize user engagement. So they want you to stay on Facebook, and the same thing is true for all of these. They want you to stay engaged as much as possible. So they need to even learn more about you and show the content that will captivate you and keep you there, scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And the product become addiction by design. And people have studied them. In a course at Rice, we do something called device abstinence. And so we ask the students to avoid all devices, laptop, phone, tablet, for 24 hours, then write an essay about the experience. And when we first did it, I'm so out of touch, I thought they would write, oh, it was so liberating. I could take walks, I could go smell the flower, I could go have coffee with my friend, oh my goodness. I was just completely wrong as one could be, not even wrong, as they said. They wrote, I can't find anyone, I don't know how to communicate with them, I can't drive anywhere because I'll get lost. You know, nothing. I mean, it was, when you look at the symptom, it was withdrawal symptom 101, classical withdrawal symptom. It was scary to read. And going back to democracy, Jonathan Haidt wrote in the Atlantic last year, the story of Babel is the best metaphor I have found for what happened in America in the 2010s, and for the fractured country we now inhabit. Something went terribly wrong, very suddenly. We were disoriented, unable to speak the same language or recognize the same truth, were cut from one another and from the past. Remind you, if you haven't read the book of Exodus, the people decided to build a tower, go to heaven, and God decided to give them Facebook. And they all and a little kind of reflection as a computer professional. So there is a science fiction novel that I read in 1985. My son was a teenager. I couldn't converse with him anymore, so I read the same book that he would read, so we have something to talk about. And I read Ender's Game. And spoiler alert, Ender is a teenage game. He thinks he's playing a video game, but he's really fighting intergalactic war. And when he wins the game, he and his friends won the war, and they destroyed the civilization. And that's how many computer professionals feel this day. We thought we had the Rebel Alliance. Turns out we're the Empire, we're the Death Star. And that's why you hear more and more talk about responsibility. But I get really offended when people say responsible AI. And that's why I got a little turned off by this trusting in AI. AI is just a program that human wrote. If I want to trust AI, I want to trust the people who build it. Corporations are just there to maximize profit. I'll come back to it. We need someone to be responsible. Look in the mirror. Michael Jackson said, right? You want to change the world, change the man in the mirror. And that should affect, if you look now at ACM Code of Ethics, it says the right thing, we just have to practice it. This is the first paragraph. Computer professional acts and change the world. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impact of the work, consistently supporting the public good. So if we want computer professionals to be ethical, one phrase, consistently support the public good. Now when I start talking about public good, people tell me you're Marxist-Leninist practically. Why? Because remember, greed is good. But let me quote to you a paragraph that you should recognize. With the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide a common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty of self and of posterity, do then and establish this Constitution for the United States. So the purpose of the Constitution is to promote the public good. How do we decide collectively what is the public good? Because your opinion and my opinion will be different. That's what the Constitution is for. It's a mechanism for us to act collectively to promote the public good. But the higher purpose is the public good. And that means that I don't know how many computing educators here, maybe I'm the only one, but you tell this to your computing educator colleagues. For educated students that are not socially responsible, then we are not being socially responsible. And that's something that I would say, if you're educating MBAs and you don't talk to them about social responsibility, you're not being a socially responsible educator. And I encourage people to read a paper that I published a couple of years ago called Deep Tech Ethics, where we start to talk to students about social responsibility, and the focus is on your actions are changing the world. Make sure they're making it a better place. And I want to quote Ed Wilson, he died a couple of years ago, and he wrote once, the true nature of humanity, the true problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and technology of gods. I would say it's even worse, because our current technology is taking advantage of our Paleolithic emotions. Everybody loves social approval because we've evolved to like social approval, so we love likes. You can say, who cares? We love likes. I do. And now there is a new game in town. Okay, it's already on Time magazine cover. That's how we know what is the dominant cultural theme of the day. And now people are talking about superintelligence and singularity. Suddenly again, people talk about it. And there's a famous thought experiment that the philosopher Nick Bostrom published in 2012. Why he is nervous about superintelligence. He said there is a superintelligent agent whose goal is to maximize the number of paper clips in its collection. In its zeal to accomplish its mission, the agent may transform first all of Earth and then incredibly portion of space into paperclip manufacturing facility. I don't know why he's worried about paperclip maximization. We already have such entities. They're called the modern corporation, and they're there to maximize profits. And all the talk about social responsibility is just talk. And I'll finish with this picture.
Yeah, so I really love the talk. At Michigan we have the Center for Social Media Responsibility, and so you hear a lot of this sort of narrative. Center for Social Media Responsibility. That's what you have. And so you hear a lot of this sort of narrative. But the question I always hear I always wonder, before, we've had 2 world wars before social media and AI. We've had slavery, we've had the Holocaust, numerous civil wars. In many ways, we've had a much more violent society pre-AI and social media, right? So, how do you reconcile that? That as much because I hear a lot of narratives about how the world is really, sort of going, I would say, falling apart because of social media and AI, but it seems to ignore the past, 500,000 years of human history, where these problems are not new. I guess maybe the blame or the cause is new, but the problems have always been embedded in human society since we recorded history.
So I'm a second generation Holocaust survivor, so I'm very, very well aware of our very painful history. And nevertheless, I would have liked to believe in what's called the long arc of history, how things are. We are kind of making progress. We look at, we are still trying to deal with the, the world, the Civil War was over 150 years ago, but in some sense it's not completely over. We're still trying to live with it. There are many things, but there was a sense that we are making slow progress. 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Now it feels we're taking many steps backwards. And so I think we collectively have responsibility. I'm not saying that things used to be hunky-dory and suddenly everything is falling apart. I'm saying we used to have a positive trend. We were worried about nuclear weapons. We thought there would be nuclear war. But we somehow managed to keep at least I wouldn't say we kept the peace, because we had many wars since World War II. But at least we avoided nuclear catastrophe. There was a sense that the world is getting better, and we are still working hard to make it better. We have many disadvantaged groups in the United States. We are trying to make it better for them. My feeling in the last few years is that, and democracy was our means to make it better, because at least collectively we are working with agreements and disagreements. We are making progress. Now I'm looking at this country and ask myself, will we still be a democracy in 2024? And honestly, I'm very afraid. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, what happened? We have to take responsibility to what has happened. And I think actually, if you want to say, the two communities that deserve I wouldn't say the blame, but the responsibility for this is the tech community and the business community.
Thank you for the interesting presentation. I kind of mixed feelings, but trying to be positive in the sense that this case is mostly the U.S., right?
Yes,
so,
this is very U.S.
right.
centric.
So right, like in the sense, I'm from Chile, so kind of feeling like I'm not a fan of the big tech, but like many of the social movements that started in South America and the equivalent here, the Occupy Wall Street or Me Too, kind of emerged because of all this technology. Like people finally could just like collectively start organizing or preparing. So, like, what kind of hat we should wear here? Just with all this.
There was do you remember the Arab Spring?
Yeah, I was trying to say.
Okay, what happened to the Arab Spring?
Good question.
So,
shut it down.
it's like technology is, I'm not saying, okay, go ahead, let's go. I use technologies like everyone else, okay? We need to sit down. I didn't try, I came here in a half an hour talk about what are the remedies. And in some sense, people now, there was just Senate hearing. Just, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a Senate hearing about how to regulate AI. And these are big questions, and there are big debates, and there are different opinions, even people who agree to do this. Just a couple of months ago, there was the letter signed by about 1,000 tech leaders, the pause AI letter, okay, signed by Elon Musk, and it got people's attention. I signed the letter, even though my feeling about Elon Musk, someone can describe it in a four-letter word previously, and I'm in complete agreement with that. But I signed the letter anyway, even though I disagree with pretty much everything in the letter. But the important message, the way I read the letter is, Silicon Valley is saying, we cannot be trusted with technology. That's the way basically they're saying, okay? We have to have, society needs to have a say in where technology is going. BMW used to have this, their kind of motto was the ultimate driving machine. And now they're being threatened by autonomous vehicles. So they changed their motto. And the new motto is, don't be driven by technology, drive it. I think this is a good motto for society, okay? I'm not saying let's abolish technology. We're not going to abolish technology. Humanity is the species of technology. We diverged from our cousins when we discovered fire, and it was the first technology. I don't know, fire or stones or whatever, one of the first technology. And we've been on a technology ride for the last roughly 500,000 years. But right now it feels like we're riding a tiger. And we somehow need to get control of where are we going. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think about this also from the neuroscience side. So for instance, there's some evidence now that you look at the representation of our thumb in our brain, it's getting bigger because of typing, right? Also, but what you were talking about, there's very clear that Silicon Valley wanted to figure out how to get dopamine released in our brains, right? So it's all about addicting us, just like you said. And so that's actually going to have long-term effects. And in some sense, we're going to need ways in which to develop withdrawal. Like, we're going to go through withdrawal at some point, right? I mean, and how we think about how it's not just changing society, but fundamentally what it is to be human is going to be really critical. And I don't think, I remember being at one of these things where Mark Zuckerberg was at, and at the time he really thought that if you just connect everybody, it's going to be great, right? Now, I don't know if he really believed that or he just believed that's how he could get dopamine into him, but there is this kind of side, this positive side, and then there's clearly that any technology can be used in a negative way. How do we communicate to, I think also to general society what these issues are? Because I think that like a bomb is very in your face, right? But I think there's a lot of these subtleties in what Silicon Valley has done that hasn't been communicated to the general public in a clear way.
No, I don't think people realize, again, that while I give this talk, because I think it needs to be said, this is really what happened. This is what happened. And the most dramatic part of it, if you want, is what happened to young people. Everybody's talking about mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. You see it on campuses now. I see just the number of students who come and ask me for some kind of an accommodation. Mm-hmm. And I used to be a bit of a hard ass. And now I just whatever you need. Because I realize now, these are people who has not even yet talked to the counseling center. And I very gently try to steer them. Go to the counseling center if you're feeling you have a hard time. But they're first coming to me, I need some kind of an accommodation. And I said, whatever you need. Mm-hmm. And there is a wave of suicides among ages 10 to 14. Think about it, 10 to 14. And when you trace when does this wave started, you go back to this pivotal year, the iPhone. Mm-hmm. So we have done we talked about IRB, somebody mentioned IRB before. We've done this colossal experiment. We've given these devices to pretty much to every child in this country. And now we're bearing the consequences of this. I would say there's blood on our hands. Yeah.
I'm curious. There seems to be an issue of we need to have perhaps a more critical lens on our relationship with technology. And I feel like this is particularly important for the humans that are designing these technologies that are perhaps being designed to increase our dopamine and just get us addicted. So if you had to create a curriculum, say for freshmen in college who are getting into the space, that you think would endow them with more context, like you just gave us, which is like amazing, what kind of classes would you want students to take?
So about 5 years ago, we started, we used to have a class on technology and society, mm-hmm. but it really focused mostly again on the business side of computing. Okay, it was taught by a professor who joined appointment in computer science in the business school, and it was mostly, I would say, more computing and organization. Didn't really look at individual. Now we're very much focusing on societal impact, and we talk about social responsibility. And I know examining this course, at the end of the course, they have to write an essay. My social responsibility as a computing professional. And it is just really moving to read the essay the students write. Okay? Because, I'm paraphrasing, but many of them write almost in the way, I was blind and now I can see. They're suddenly seeing, because before that they were just thinking, let's go in Silicon Valley, it's great, I'll go, good job, good colleagues, good money, what's the problem? Now, I'm not saying that they all will now shun Silicon Valley. We're not there yet. But one of the students, I did an informal poll, and I asked students to write down and fold a piece of paper anonymously, will they take a job from Facebook? And 2/3 said yes. 1/3 said no. I asked if someone willing to say why yes, and then he said, one student spoke up and said, interesting job, smart colleagues, good money, yeah, I'll take it. But another, I asked one of the naysayers to say why, and he said, I will be a Rice graduate, I'll have, in computer science, I'll have lots of good job offer. Why should I take the ethically questioned one? Okay? So the hope is that, and this was, of course, was elective. We had the students who were knocking at the door to get in, and the students were telling us, the department, you must make it mandatory, and we just voted a month ago to make it a required course.
That's great. Yeah.
So, one progress, one step at a time. Yes?
So, several questions as someone who's not within, the computer science space.
Me neither.
But in terms of, so often we hear on campuses, so now I'm coming down to the campus part, that we'll hear from our computer science colleagues, we don't have enough space in the curriculum to offer ethics, right? So like at our university, it's the communication people. I know at other universities, it's different, being shopped out. So I guess, how is the message being taken to the computer scientists to like get it through to them? But I think the other question is, one thing that's not coming up today at all is this idea of the humanities.
Okay.
The humanities, right? And so, in other words, because we hear so much about STEM, and if computer scientists are concerned about this, or how can we get them concerned about this to help to advocate for the humanities on campuses, when it's our computer science departments who are getting the bulk of the funding and our humanities are being bled dry. And I think this goes back to the, I think everyone's seen the poster on Facebook, right? Science can tell you how to bring a dinosaur back to life. The humanities will tell you why that's a bad idea, right?
It's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
So, I'm less familiar with public universities, so I'll make a comment about elite private universities such as Rice and Northwestern. In my opinion, they have lost the moral way. You go back and you say, what is the purpose of the university? And you go, what is the 1940-something AUP Statement of Academic Freedom? Why do we deserve academic freedom? It's means, it's not an end. Academic freedom is not an end, it's means. Okay? It is to promote the mission of the university, which they say is the common good. That is the mission of the university. The common good, the public good, we can argue about the nuances. Private universities, if I watch them now over the past few decades, have lost their way. If you ask the president, what are you trying to accomplish? Raise money and go up in ranking. So it has become a morally vacuous pursuit of money and prestige. Now, we the first one to admit that money and prestige are important means. Okay? You want to start a program, you want to hire more faculty members to teach ethics. It takes money. Prestige attract good colleagues, good students. There are means. We've confused means and ends. If we start that the promotion of the common good is our core mission, then you start to go, okay, are we transmitting this value to our student? And tell me if I'm wrong, but here's the message that the Rice student get. Tell me if it's different here in Northwest. The implicit message, my son was a Rice student. He was there before I went there. I followed him to Rice. And I ran it on him. I said, am I right? And he said, yes, pretty much so. What is the implicit message that the student at Rice gets? You're very smart. It's true, all the students at Rice are very smart. All elite private schools are very selective. You're getting great education. It's true. I mean, the elite university gets fantastic education. Go have a great career, and don't forget about us. This is the message the students at elite private university get. No one is talking to them. You're very talented. You got great education. Go make the world a better place. And do well for yourself. Nobody is complaining. Nobody is saying, take a vow of poverty, go to Calcutta and be Mother Teresa. Okay? But these people who are training, they are going to be the leader of society, and they don't come out of Rice or Northwestern with a sense of social responsibility. So we have to start, I'm talking about computing students, but it actually should apply at the end to all students. Okay? And I said, I'm focusing right now, if I look what happened in the last 40 years, I said it's the business community and the computing community. But even the neglect of the humanity is because we are not looking at the picture of what is the mission of the university. And part of the mission of the university is to preserve culture, because this is one of the things that's unique about, we talk about, think about it. People talk about extinction of some language in Indonesia, and we say, oh, this is a loss for human culture. We should try to preserve it, because we look at human culture as something very precious. We need to preserve. This is the mission of the humanities, and the discussion, cultivation of values. We have not done such a great job in engineering, okay? And I think humanities, we are way off topic here, but I think humanities suffer from what I call major envy. Okay? They'll never have the numbers. Right now, computing is the biggest major on campus. Okay? We are not going to have this number of people studying classical languages. The mission of humanity should be not to teach their majors, to teach the whole university. Instead of counting how many majors do we have, and then they look terrible, and people talk about the end of the humanities, their mission is, we are the one who preserve and transmit culture and values. And they should be talking to all students in the university. But we can spend the rest of the day just talking about it. Yes, please.
Well, one thing I was looking around to see if our Stanford friends were here, because some of their colleagues published a PNAS article in 21 advocating for an ethics and society review as a precondition to research funding for AI.
Say it again?
So Michael Bernstein was one of the authors on a paper in PNAS. So he's in computer science, advocating that there should be an ethics and society review that as a precondition to research funding. So when you are going to get funded to develop technology, and they were kind of like, because you'd mentioned IRB, and they were drawing that parallel with IRB, that this would be, another set of standards. I mean, so I'm just curious, like, as we're talking about ways that to raise consciousness, I think, certainly educating students is important. I know that there's also at my university, Carnegie Mellon, there's a lot of lip service to do good, telling people that, but then they go out and the incentives are not aligned with that, right? Mm-hmm. And this would be one way to shift incentives if people have
So people have said every paper should have kind of a paragraph or a section, ethical consequences. And National Academy issued a study a couple of years ago about responsible research. And I'll come back to responsible research in a minute. But when I saw the report, I felt it was another diversionary technique by Silicon Valley, especially because John Hennessy, who used to be the chairman of the board of Alphabet, was one member there. So far, if we look, the problem is definitely not of academic research. I have not seen that what broke the world is academic research. What got us to where we got us is a decision is business models, The problem was not with the page algorithm. Page algorithm was a great algorithm to give us ranking of search results. It was the decision based on advertising. That's not research. Once you base on advertising, you follow from that, you use machine learning to decide what Anita should see. But the machine learning they have used is fairly generic machine learning. It's a same machine, you want to get this kind of machine learning. It's a generic machine learning that we use. It wasn't like the supercut. However, there are cases where, for example, I was really struck to see a paper appear in a major conference a couple of years ago, how to develop persuasive chatbots. Now, the title of the paper was Persuasive Chatbot for the Social Good. Mm-hmm. What was the application? The chatbot will convince you to exercise more. And I was thinking, give me a break. What is the killer app for persuasive chatbots? Exercise more? Or you can think, all of you can immediately think of all kind of nefarious ways to use persuasive chatbots. And by putting this generic, very generic, it's almost like It's almost like jailbreaking the conference view system. I'm talking about social good. What do you want? And the answer is that the last thing we need now is more persuasive chatbots. So yes, but not every paper. I mean, the idea is you have to apply to every paper. You know, I'm looking at my papers, and my research is I'm left brain and right brain, okay? My left brain, the research I do is very, very technical, and very little of it will have ethical consequences. My right brain, I'm complaining about my left brain. Okay, looks like it's time.
Once
Yeah.
again.